good evening and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of the Flying with Phoenix speaker series hosted by LTF Ventures here at University of Chicago. LTF Venture is a student-run VC fund at University of Chicago, and LTF launched Flying with Phoenix speaker series last year so that we connect industry-leading business leaders, entrepreneurs, and investors to engage with the entrepreneurial community here at University of Chicago and beyond. And today it is our great honor to have Ms. Yan Lan to join us for this 1-hour discussion. So welcome, Yan.
Thank you very much, David. It's a great pleasure to join you for the talk.
Great. Again, thank you for coming that early in the morning in China. So before we jump into all those wonderful questions that's being submitted by our students before this interview, as well as those that might pop up at the bottom of our screen using the Q&A function of Zoom webinar, I'm just gonna give everybody a little bit of a background for Yan, a little bio so that we can contextualize our conversation going forward. So Yan Lan is Lazard's Vice Chairman of Investment Banking and Chairman and CEO of Lazard Greater China. She joined Lazard as Managing Director and Head of Greater China Investment Banking in April 2011. She leads a Greater China team in cooperation with Lazard's global network to advise on cross-border M&A transactions involving Chinese companies. Prior to Lazard, Lan spent 20 years with French law firm Guide, eventually rising to partner and chief representative of the Beijing office. Lan holds a PhD in law from the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva and an LLM in international law from Beijing University, of course, that is in China. Again, welcome, Lan, to LTF Ventures speaker series.
Thank you, David.
So I guess my first question is really about this book that you wrote in 2020. I had a chance to read it. It's a fascinating read. The name of it is A House of Yan, a family at the heart of a century in Chinese history. So for any of those who are interested in it, you can find it on Amazon. So maybe for those who haven't read it, can you briefly tell us a little bit about your book and especially its significance to you and to people who want to know more about China's recent past?
Thank you very much, David. To talk first about my book. In fact, my book, The House of Yan, tells the story of my family of 3 generations, my grandparents, my parents, and myself, through almost 100-year China modern history. My grandfather, Yan Baohang, was a very close friend of General Zhang Xueliang in the Northeast. But he became secret agent during the Second World War under direct leadership of Zhou Enlai, the Communist Party leader, and got very important information during this wartime period. My father, Yan Mingfu, was Mao Zedong's Russian interpreter during 1950s and 1960s. He wrote a book entitled From Honeymoon to the Cold War to tell as a witness the relationship between China and the Soviet Union. But unfortunately, both of them were arrested during the Cultural Revolution and put in prison. Myself, I was very young, only 7, 8 years old, and I was sent to the countryside with my mother in the labor camp. So this is I witnessed this darkness period of 10 years disaster, 10 years Cultural Revolution. And afterwards, after Cultural Revolution, our life, my family's one, mine has greatly changed together with the China destiny. So I want to, it's amazing because I lived almost 15 years in Europe, in France. When I told the story of what we lived during the Cultural Revolution, the foreign friends are very astonished. So I noticed that not only the foreign friends, but also the Chinese younger generation friends know very little about what had happened during the Cultural Revolution and even the period which preceded. So I decided to write down this book as a witness of the time we have been through. And as American President Theodore Roosevelt famously said once, better you know the past, better you prepare for the future. I would like to say, more you learn about China history, better you understand China today.
Yes, I totally echo that sentiment, Lance. Thank you so much for sharing with us this overview of your book. So you mentioned you belong, to the generation that had to undergo the horror of the Cultural Revolution, and you are, in fact, you can say one of the lucky generation, because when the Cultural Revolution ended in 1977, you were the first cohort of students to have attended university in China. And of course, attending university in China back then through the Gaokao system is much harder than it is today. So what was it like to be able to attend college after, that decade of political chaos and turmoil in the country? Why did you choose to study French as your major? And did you see it almost as a ticket to get out of China, to see the world? Is that what's going on in your thinking when you choose the school and major?
Yes, even when I listen to your question, I still, my memory, it's really vivid about the moment when Deng Xiaoping announced the possibility for the young people in China to take exam to go to university. It was my dream. During 10 years Cultural Revolution, we didn't have right to go to university except your peasants, soldiers, or workers, right? So when we learned this news, we are just thrilled. And I worked day and night for 3 months to get prepared. And it seems to me, this is my last chance. It's like a last dream, which could change my life. But indeed, it was to go to university and change my life. So why study French? During the Cultural Revolution, I like very much to read all kinds of foreign books, right? Novels, a lot of French novels, literature translated into Chinese, but we could only read at the time secretly because all those foreign books were forbidden.
Right.
Afterwards, I have choice to study language. I said, oh, wow, it would be fantastic if I can read all this French literature, Balzac, Victor Hugo, Émile Zola, etc., just name it, in its original language. What a beauty we can admire, we can appreciate. So this is why, one reason I decided to study French. But at that time, very earlier, 77, 78, I didn't dare to think about go abroad. It just think about go to university is my first dream. And go abroad thoughts or wish came only after I went to Peking University for study international law. At that time, China started opening, and at beginning of 80s, a few Chinese students got scholarship, and then more and more scholarship offered by foreign institutions, by foreign universities. So this is why I decided to go abroad to pursue higher study.
Right, and abroad you went, right? You went to Switzerland, in Geneva. You studied and got your PhD in law, and with a specialization in international arbitration. So when you finished your dissertation, you got your diploma, you had many career options. You can, stay in academia, you could have practice law for some international institution in Switzerland or Europe. You could have gone to the private sector. And what made you decide to choose the private sector? And now looking back, do you think you have made the right decision at that time?
First of all, I must say, even today, I think I made a right decision at that time. Why private sector in facing a few choices? Because I like it. It was my passion. I dreamed to be a lawyer. I like to be a practicing lawyer.
Right.
So this is why when I get offer from, in fact, in Paris, from one American law firm, another is a French law firm. So the American law firm proposed me to join their international arbitration team. It was my specialty for my thesis, etc. But the French law firm proposed me to join their team for China-related investment legal advice. I think, wow, this was my comparative advantage. I assess where I can quickly do the best using my knowledge. So I was a Chinese legal student, right? So, so I had this Chinese legal background and as well as European one. So so this is where I can do the best to advise a French client, European client for China legal matters. So this is why I didn't hesitate a second. I decided to go to French law firm to practice in law and to help French and European investors for their investment project in China. So my takeaway to the young people today and to maybe to the student today here is when you choose a profession, you may have some dilemmas. Oh, I get a few offers as brilliant students, graduate from U Chicago. And then you should go for your passion. What do you like the most? What do you like to do? Imagine in your head. With your great interest, you will do well. And secondly, you can assess what is your competitive advantage.
Right.
You are Chinese, you are French, you are American, where you can use your knowledge to do the best. This is my advice.
Thank you. Thank you for that advice. You did stay with that law firm you joined for over 20 years in Paris, and eventually rising to the rank of partner and then head of Beijing office. Now you're among a few people, a few women in China actually, who led a major foreign investment bank. And my next question was, what is it like about to be like a woman in business and law at the beginning of your career compared to what it is today? And are there any significant differences between being a woman in business in China vis-a-vis in the West, like France, for example?
Yeah, so today I think about the professional woman statute and the situation in business, in a financial sector, in legal sector. It's certainly got a lot of progress comparison with 30 years ago. I like to tell you an anecdote. When I joined the French law firm, the few first days I heard in the PA, they said, Messieurs les associés. Now it's a partner meeting. So Mr. Partners, let's join the meeting room. I was very curious. So why only Monsieur? Why only the Mr.? No Madame, Mesdames, no ladies, partner? They said, oh, Lan, in our firm, over 70 years, no one female partners. I said, wow, it's really bizarre. But well, as a new beginner, I said, okay, I have to do my work, I have to learn and build up my skill, and we will see. After 6 years, I fixed appointment with my managing partner, and I asked him directly whether or not I have chance to become partner of this firm. He said, "Oh, Lan, you have done very well, China business development. Everybody recognize your achievement, but only, in our firm, we don't have a woman partner because you get married and you will have children and you will certainly spend more time for your family rather for work." So I said, no, I grew up in China in my education. So the woman and the man has an equality for any opportunities. And the woman hold, in China, we said woman holds the half of sky. He was very surprised. I argued with him during 1 hour. And by the end, he said, "No, it's only the fool who won't change the idea. I vote for you." Because in Lazard, in this G the law firm, so the partnership is by voting system. Yes. So you have to get 70% of vote. So my turn came, the meeting had, I was in Beijing, at midnight, they gave me a call, said, "Oh, Lan, you got almost 100% of vote." So in fact, I think my takeaway is you have to have your self-confidence as a female, a beginner, young girl. You cannot think, because I'm a girl, I cannot do it. This is a kind of a mindset. Have self-confidence and build up your skill and build up your leadership capability and be bold and be resilient. This is also my lesson.
So you were the first
to promote
female partner that they promoted to their rank in JID.
Yes.
But you were not, you're certainly not the last, right? After you, there were many.
No, after me, they are, every year, there are few women partners, women lawyers joining the partnership. And as you mentioned, I just want to add a point. I'm so proud of Lazard Greater China. Today in our small team, we have less than 30 bankers. Mm-hmm. But our senior officer above VP, 65% are women.
Wow.
And we have five partners and 5 are women.
Wow.
I don't do it deliberately because they are women. They earn their position by their merits. I think it's very important. So now I promote inclusive for young men and male bankers to promote their career, as well as for the women. But I think once you have a role model, it's quite easy to be inspired and to follow the models, right?
And yes, right. Yeah. In the West, in the US, there's sometimes some company, in order to fulfill this diversity quota, they put one woman on the board and they say, "I hit the quota. That's it. One woman as a chief inclusion diversity officer. That's it. Everybody else is still men." But it's much more than that, right? Once you have
it's a really good point, David, because for me, in a board, because I sit in a few board in France, and you cannot have only women. Right. At least you have 3 women, you make your voice united. And in France, even today, they have a law named Gobet, Loi Gobet. They required in every public listed company, you must have in board more than 45% of women. You wow. See, it's very important. Yes, sometimes you need a quota imposed. And then when the habit and the practice became, the habit formed, and then you can, just continue. So I'm not against the quota issue, but I really agree with you. The only voice, just like in Chinese, we said it's a flower vase, right? Huaping. So there to decoration. It's not to play a true role.
Right, right. And that's certainly changing in many, many institutions in West and in China. So you said you joined Lazard from G in 2011, right? After over 2 decades of service as a practicing lawyer, something you are very proud of. What makes you decide to do that big transition of career from law to investment banking? And how does your background in law help your role right now as a senior professional in finance in China?
I didn't, first of all, make a decision to this change. I was proposed by Lazard. I got a Lazard offer after 10 years ago, after I made a presentation about China M&A in New York. And then I got this offer to join Lazard to be the head of Lazard Greater China. So first reaction, I say, no, I'm not a banker. For 20 years, I was a lawyer. But then so they said, okay, we can wait. So after a few months, I made an analysis for myself. Why this first no refusal? It's because of the fear of uncertainty. Why this fear of uncertainty? Because I don't know this profession. I never know. I don't know if I can deliver. I can meet their expectation. But then I think this uncertainty can be limited. This risk can be limited in case I could not do it. I tried my best. So I can still come back to my legal profession, right? Continue to practicing law. So once the risk is limited, I immediately make my decision to make this change. Even today, I'm so happy about this change. A lot of challenges, a lot of new things to learn, and fascinating, and a lot of fun. So you ask whether or not the legal profession contributes to the financial profession. In my situation, I said yes, indeed, because it's really very complementary. When you, as a financial advisor, you advise clients in a transaction, you must design the structure. The design structure, legal structure, financial structure. Legal structure, it's really it's used to be what we're doing for M&A lawyer, right? So, and then you have to anticipate a lot of issues, including, in particular, legal issues, legal risks today. And so it's also the come back to lawyers' automatic reflection. Of course, I cannot say, oh, everywhere there are risks. Otherwise, we cannot go forward. But to be aware of risks and to find a solution, it's also very important. What is important? What is interesting is that it's really very complementary work. So you can see not only myself, I saw some of my colleagues in Lazard in New York, in US team, in European team, they used to be also partners in the law firms.
Wonderful. So when you do those cross-border M&A deals, you do those legal structure design. Of course, the client will have to hire their own law firm to facilitate that. Will you kind of sometimes look at that proposal and be like, I think this can be improved because you have done that so many times? Or legal lawyers a lot? Do they find annoying?
Yes, well, I mean, yes, I'm always very happy. I certainly, I should stay in my shoes, right? So I'm a financial advisor. So with a lawyer, of course, we are working together for the best interest of our clients and to the success of the transaction. So this is why we like to engage a lawyer at early stage and talk with them and exchange ideas. I think it's really mutual beneficial. And today, David, today in the very challenging world, geopolitical challenge, we particularly need first of all, to think whether or not a transaction can be done. The first thought for me, it's a check with the lawyer whether or not the lawyer in the country where target company is, whether or not we can do, we can get approval, view regulatory issue, view CFIUS issue, view foreign investment approval issues. So now it's if I say before we have to design structure, talk with client, and deal more or less, designed, we invite the lawyer join. Now, the first thing we ask the lawyer to check whether or not we can do, whether or not it's feasible or not.
Right. That's absolutely true. And I'm glad you mentioned about regulatory risk. And before we jump into the great many questions that students had asked about M&A, business trend in China, US, and Europe, in our second half of this discussion, I saw there's one question popping up in the group chat. So Shuo Qiu is asking you that, could you elaborate a little more on how to find a role model in your career, and maybe to share with us who your role model is, and how has he or she be conducive to your growth as a professional in that industry?
Yes, yeah, it's a good question. And for me, it's very simple. My role model is my mother, because she was a professional woman,
right.
And she was a diplomat, okay, and spoke perfectly English, French, and Italian.
Wow.
And the Italian is she learned by herself from a dictionary, from Latin, Italian, and French. But she always told me, Lan, it's not because you are a girl, you cannot do the things. But when you decided to do, you have to pursue your goal. So this is always, and then you can discover in my book, my grandmother, the female in Yan family, it's very strong. My mother always, it's so resilient, even in the darkness period. She encouraged me to learn when we were in the countryside, and she always told me the Western literature, Chinese classic literature stories, the poems, etc. So I enriched a lot thanks to her, all this Chinese and Western culture during my younger, teenager period. In fact, in China, it was during the Cultural Revolution. In the school, we didn't teach anything but politics, right? So I think my mom is always my role model, and so in fact, you can find a lot of role model around you, and not necessarily in your firm. Of course, if you have a woman in the company you will join, you can talk with her and exchange if you get idea, and you can certainly take her as a mentor, right? So, and mentor is not necessarily woman. They have a man can be your mentor for your career. I think it's for our woman, just like you, I said, I was the first foreign woman, female, to be the partner. Without all the males support, how can I be, right? So they are all supported once they realize it was their fault or their regret not to have a woman as a partner among them.
That's a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing your mother story with us as well. Surely inspirational. And now I guess it's time we can move on to talk a little more about the work that you do, the business trends that we witness in China these days because of all sorts of changing geopolitical and economic conditions around the world. So one of our audience, Martin, actually asked a question. Over the past 40 years of reform and opening up in China, right? China has attracted lots of foreign investments, and integrated itself into an indispensable part of the global economy. But in the past 2 years, however, you see that China has closed its doors to international travelers. That's largely because of COVID. Do you think that China will also close its doors to foreign investment? Is globalization still the mainstream, given the current political polarization between Beijing and the Western world, especially US? And what do you see for the future of China's relationship with the West in general?
Okay, a lot of questions, three questions. First of all, I think I must say, no, China is not closing the door for foreign investment. Just look at the statistic. Last year, in 2021, the China FDI, foreign direct investment in China, increased 22% in US dollar term. And it's interesting to see it's Asia country increased their investment by 25%. And the sector-wise, they are the sector attract most investment are the high-tech sector and technology-related consumer service sector. Apart from the financial sector, as you know, all the big international banks, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, just name it, UBS, they now increase their shares in their security firm in China, either 100% or majority control, right? And also a lot of big asset management companies set up their wholly owned asset management in Shanghai, and also life insurance company for insurance company try also to get majority shareholder in the joint venture in China, because in the sector, Chinese government opened the door, and since 2 years, they allow the foreign investors to control majority or even 100% in the banks, asset management, life, the insurance company, life or no life, and as well as asset management. This is a big trend into China, and also in automobile sector. So you can see there are still a lot of opportunities. And the Chinese government launched their new strategic policy named as a double circulation.
Right.
What is double circulation? One is concentrate on China domestic market, upgrade their technology, encourage innovation. And the second one, it's external circulation arm to attract more FDI in China. It's very interesting. But of course, I must say that the China market has also a lot of challenges for foreign investors. New regulations, some certainly uncertainty of some regulation environment, a strong competition with local partners, local companies, right? And also higher labor costs, etc. All this challenge. So I think the China market is evolving. So foreign investors has to adapt their strategy accordingly. This is what I like to say. And globalization is still a mainstream for China, but a lot of challenges now, a lot of change now. So it's interesting because China still remains the world biggest exporter, right? Yeah. And the Chinese government armed to be the biggest in the world, the biggest importer in the world. This is interesting. So now they are open door. They want to become the biggest importer. And so I don't know if you realize that the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Cooperation Partnership, became effective since the 1st January this year. This is China with the Asian countries, 15 Asian countries, and Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, became the world's largest, biggest free trade zone.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see, because China, it's a biggest benefit from globalization. And they will remind, because the Chinese economy during 20 years is such integrated in the world economic system, right? So, but due to all this challenge, you can see also on the same time, the trend for regionalization, right? So this is what I like to say. And so the last question, what is the China-Western relationship facing all this geopolitical changes and the challenges, especially China-US conflict? So I can just, I would like to describe this China-Western relationship as 3C: cooperation, competition, and the confrontation.
Right.
So all depends with the country, with whom, and depend on the countries, areas, moment, events, etc. So it's an evolving situation, but we can generally summarize as 3C. For example, today with US, it's more on the confrontation side, right? And with Europe, maybe competition and cooperation. So it's interesting to notice this change. Yes, so I don't know if I answer your question.
It did. Absolutely, and thank you for that. And just to follow up on those, you know, tensions that started ever since the 2018 trade war between US and China, has there been a slowing down of cross-border M&A from your perspective? And if it has, what was the root cause? Is it just people are wary about investment in China these days? Or is it that the Chinese government are making it harder, right, with regulations on data security, for example, that came into force by the end of last year, that made it more difficult for, let's say, a foreign, you know, social media company to come in and invest in China, or vice versa, right? The whole saga with TikTok almost getting banned in the US might add to that kind of worries. So is that what you think is the reason behind this slowing down of M&A activity between US and China?
Yes, first of all, I totally agree. And the statistics show that it's a huge slowing down of cross-border M&A in China, right? So, so I saw a statistic from 2019 to last year, 3 years, 2021. So the cross-border M&A in China reduced almost 40%. But if we can make, if we can look into the details, the cross-border M&A include outbound and inbound, right?
Yes.
So outbound M&A for China since this period of 3 years reduced more than 50%. 50%. In term, yeah, 50%. It's true. And in particular with US, because when nowadays I have meeting with my clients, Chinese clients, no one want to look at any opportunity in US. They said because of the regulatory issues on both sides. We are prudent. We don't like to waste time and don't get a deal closed. So we have to always assess the risk of closing, right? And now to invest in US and vice versa. Well, I mean, to invest in US for Chinese companies, it's a high risk of closing. So, but what is interesting to see, but inbound M&A increased during this 3 years period of time, increased 40%. It's interesting to see 40%. So, like I said, it's in the different sector. But you mentioned, it's interesting, the data issue, the tech issue, all the strength and control on tech company, education in the education sector, right? And also now they have a new, it's a draft regulation by CSRC. So they require that the company who want to go to abroad for listing in certain sectors, including VIE structure,
yes,
should get preliminary registration. That means preliminary approval by CSRC. And also the company who has more than 1 million data, personal data,
right,
should also get approval by Chinese relevant authority to go IPO abroad. So a lot of restrictions. So this may hesitant for foreign investors to invest, because when we invest, we have to see when we what could be the exit, right? So especially for the financial investors. But I should say, be pragmatic. There are other sectors. They are encouraged by Chinese authority, by Chinese government, such as energy transition, such as industrial internet, yes, etc. So in a new infrastructure, and in those sectors, encouraged sector, you can certainly invest. So for the foreign investors, my advice is when you look at China opportunities, you have to see which sector encouraged by Chinese government. What you can see this policy, it's very clearly indicated in its 5-year plan. China, we can say in the macro economy, it's still a planning economy system, right? So this 5-year plan gave you clear discussion, a direction, and the sector-wise in which they are encouraged. And what is interesting also, for example, in 2 weeks, they will have, every year they have this annual session of 2 meetings. We said National People's Congress meeting. In this meeting, they will announce annual plan. So this is also very important to assess where legally, policy-wise, encourage sector. So this is, we should bear in mind. And the China market is huge. There are sectors you can certainly, it's a new growth sector, like I mentioned before.
It's
in which, yeah, sorry.
No,
go ahead.
It's a curious case that you mentioned. You look at the 5-year plan and try to see which sectors are encouraged by China, and then invest in those or do business in those. But the case of education is very curious. A friend of mine whose family runs, one of the largest education company in China, New Oriental, they got devastated by this regulation. And who would have thought that education or sending kids abroad or tutoring them math and English could have been, banned in China overnight? So I guess a broader question I have follow up in that for you is that when you are looking at those industry, how do you make the judgment which one is going to be safe, which one is not going to be? People say education is evergreen, 长青, but it seems no longer. What about the other industry that people say, well, evergreen, healthcare, biotech? Are those, facing the same kind of threat, regulation, or do you think those are okay?
Yeah, I think you are pointing right issue in China for the investors as well, Chinese and the foreigners. Now, the biggest issue today, biggest risk today is uncertainty of regulatory environment. You cannot, you can see the big directions. You can see the directions, you can see the sector encouraged, but you never know in the subsector, in which sector it will be banned.
Right.
Today it's encouraged and tomorrow will be banned. But one trend, in China, everything changed very fast in the speed overnight. For example, when the Chinese government launched this common prosperity,
Yes.
you have to think about it. What is mean? What can be the consequence, right? The common path prosperity. And and also they encourage, because of the population the decrease of newborn issue, right? So the population it's decreased. There's a huge issue for China. This is one of the biggest issue for me facing China in 10, 20 years.
Right.
So when you said, okay, we encourage young couple to have more, to have at least 2 or 3.
Yes.
The young couple say, no, it's too expensive.
Yes.
One is one is education, another is the housing, right? So the education. So it's logically, you have to think about why they really ban this kind of education way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
you have to see this in the big picture, and you have to follow it every day. When you come back to Hong Kong, to Shanghai, you will be much more aware of what's happening and what will happen.
Absolutely. And it seems like you have to look at the biggest of pictures, demographic changes that might only take place 20 years later. Actions are already taken right now by the government to address them. So those are the things that you need to watch out for.
Yeah, very dramatic measure. We are not, personally, I not agree the way to do it, because in other countries, we will have months and months, year and year discussion, debate in the parliament before adopt a rule, right? Adopt a regulation. The Chinese one, it's the overnight, it's forbidden.
Absolutely.
But in the long run, they have certainly pros and cons, but in long run, they will see the consequence. And then they can also adjust back quickly.
That's true.
So this is China's situation.
That is a dilemma of the Chinese model. You also mentioned, dual circulation. You mentioned the difficulty of Chinese tech company to go listed now in the US, normally NASDAQ, New York Exchange, those are a popular destination for Chinese tech companies now. There's regulation in China trying to limit that. There's also regulation by Congress in the US trying to delist a lot of Chinese companies that are in the stock exchange in New York. So a lot of those companies are now actually coming home, either to relist in Hong Kong or the Shanghai Star Board that's been recently launched, or in Beijing, the new stock exchange that just opened up there. Do you think that this wave of returning Chinese companies, the so-called China concept stocks, would significantly change the capital market in China? And is it going to be for the better or for the worse? So some argument is saying that those companies can raise money abroad in the past very easily. Now they don't have that anymore. They can only tap into the Chinese capital market, which is smaller. But some others will argue that with those good quality companies, you actually can encourage the Chinese capital market to do better. What do you think is the right way to think about that here?
Yeah, I think first of all, we have to look at the facts. Because of regulation, which impose, the restrictions on both sides, China side and US side. So the China concept stocks, some of them have to go back, delist. So I observe 3 trends. First of all, this started even since more than 2 years ago. The Chinese, when the US-China started the confrontation and escalation of its conflict, some Chinese companies listed in US already take initiative to do dual listing in Hong Kong, right? So this is one, like Baidu, they did dual listing in Hong Kong and other Chinese SOEs. Second way to do is delisted in US and come back to, most of them come back to Hong Kong stock exchange. And the third, so the Hong Kong stock exchange and Chinese one is very happy to have them back, right? So it's increased the volume of transaction. And as you mentioned, I think it's the good quality companies will, will certainly improve the quality of stock in the China stock exchange market. And so the third way, you may notice that Hong Kong launched the end of last year, Hong Kong Stock Exchange launched the possibility to spark, right? So some Chinese companies today who either cannot go to US and he will waiting for de-spark possibilities. And some companies listed in US and the delisting, and also using de-spark way to relisting in Hong Kong. So this is, I think inevitably, this is the trend due to the political, issues, geopolitical issues. But I think for me, it's when they come back, it's really China Stock Exchange in Shanghai, Shenzhen, even in Beijing, and Hong Kong is the most beneficial one for this trade.
Absolutely. And very briefly, you mentioned the introduction of SPAC in Hong Kong. Do you think that's something that, how would that change the game in the IPO in Hong Kong? Do you expect a lot of SPAC to be launched this year, or do you think that's already, the trend is already past the peak in the last 2 years? Now it's all coming down, going back to normal?
No, I think because it's brand new in Hong Kong, I met already a few investors who get approval. The first approval is the China Merchant Bank, international. They got the first SPAC approved, and I saw they are in the pipeline before the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. They have a dozen applicant to waiting for approval. So I think this will be very interesting to observe. And this is the third way. I mean, it's the way for the companies to go IPO, well, to be listed in Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So I think it's not yet start. This year will be a new trend. It's although in US, maybe in New York, it's already, because it's launched since 2 years ago. It's now it's became, it's a sort of normal. But in Hong Kong, it's brand new, and we will see. Today, it's too early to assess their results, well, consequence, but certainly 1 year after, the same time next year, we can tell more whether it's successful or not. But the Hong Kong regulation on Spark and de-Spark is also quite strict.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So our last question in this section about business trend is a very broad one. We live in 2022 now, and it is not off to a great start. May I say, there's inflation threatening a lot of the developed economy. There's Omicron threatening a lot of economy that doesn't have access to vaccines. China is facing a lot of challenges, both in terms of long-term demographic-wise and short-term in terms of COVID situation right now. There's also now a war going on in Europe that just started overnight a few days ago, and that really shocked the market. So under all of these kind of uncertainties surrounding the macro economy in 2022, how do you see them affecting the cross-border M&A activity between US, China, and China and Europe? Perhaps we haven't talked about Europe, China a lot today. What do you see on that front? Do you think that destabilizing, geopolitical events in Europe is going to disrupt the flow of capital and M&A activity between Europe and China?
Yeah, this is a good question. Yes, facing all these difficulties and the challenges, I'm sure. I think the M&A, cross-border M&A in China this year, 2020, will be very challenging. Well, for a few reasons. Of course, it's to continue with US. Almost no Chinese investors look at US opportunities. Very, very few. And yes, indeed, China player look actively in Europe. Just to share with you, last year, so the Chinese M&A in Europe, the biggest, if you think, look at the whole China outbound investment,
right,
the first destination is Asia. And almost the same, it's take 27% of total China outbound M&A and 25% in Europe. So the Europe is the second most actively, look at region. And so today, well, apart US, Europe, it's still very, it's a favorable destination for Chinese players, Chinese investors. But only after pandemic, we noticed that almost all European major countries, EU countries, set up, published a new rule on foreign investment examination, just like US, similar to US CFIUS system for mainly, in particular, toward Chinese investors. But it's only concerned the high tech, that means AI, chips, semiconductors, and biotech, or all the project sensitive to national security issue. So that means apart that, a lot of other areas, for example, consumer sector, the brands, the Chinese, now, the middle class are chasing the good quality of things, brands, appears, and foods, etc. So there are a lot of opportunities in Europe on this sector, and also healthcare, medical equipment, and manufacturing, normal manufacturing capability, technology, etc. So there are still a lot opportunities for Chinese investors to look at that. And vice versa. In China, the European companies, as you know, it's the luxury company. It's their dream destination, the biggest market in the world last year for LVMH and for others. And also for consumer goods companies, they all consolidate their investment in China and automobile sector. The automobile sector, China market provides the biggest potential in the near future for EV, for environmental electrical car, etc. So on this sector, so the cross-border M&A between Europe and China, it's a major destination. But Chinese investors also look at now started, well, since years, look at Latin America and Eastern Europe. But now today, since yesterday, this is a war. Ukraine conflict make this certainly a pause, right? So we have to look at it will take time and to see how it's evaluate a lot of uncertainties. But what I can say, it's this Ukraine war conflict will definitely, certainly slow down the global economic recovery from pandemic. and also slow down the Chinese investors to invest in Europe. Yes. Because Europe is the most hated, the most serious impact by this war because of increase of price of gas and oil. European country depend 40% of their gas supply come from Russia, right? So ECB yesterday they make a simulation. They said if there is a 10% cut on gas supply for the European countries, EU countries, they will cost 0.7% of their GDP in average. So it's really very serious consequence on European countries. So it's when you have the instability, worries, inflation, it may be certainly not a good moment to do everything.
Absolutely, but let's not end today on that solemn note, that very almost gloomy outlook of the economy. Let's talk the last few minutes about perhaps your advice for our students here today who are about to graduate or will graduate in a few years and are optimistic entering into workforce and economy. And many of them will choose to go into either financial service or law firms, or going to law school or business school. What's your advice for these students entering to professional service? And perhaps in relation to that, what have been some of the skills and attributes to you that have characterized the most successful analysts and associates at the firm that you lead?
Okay, so I think the most successful junior bankers are all have the following character or qualities. Sure. First of all, curiosity. When they enter into the firm, they are eager to learn. The curiosity and also the quick learning capability. This is very important. And then the attitude for hard working. In the financial service sector, it's not a secret. But I must say, for you, you Chicago graduate, you are already get trained, because I met a few years ago alumni from you, graduate from you Chicago in Lazard, and then I asked him, "Wow, the work must be very tough and harder." He said, "No, madam, it's really nothing comparison with you Chicago work." So I think you are all trained to work hard, right? So learning quickly and work hard, it will allow you to build up the solid foundation for technical skills, right? The firm need, the sector-wise need. For example, for us, financial modeling and accounting, etc., the legal knowledge, and you need to absorb quickly and learn quickly. And another quality, it's a good communication. If you are you have good communication skill, you can progress very quick. Then you just work there alone, because you have to discuss with your peers and get their advice. And then it's a sort of a shortcut. You learn more quickly, right? Instead of you are doing 10 hours research and 2 years senior than you, 2 years analyst can tell you, just in 10 minutes, you can find where you can find your answer, right? So the communication with your manager is also important, to have a good thought, suggestions, etc. So it's very important. So the communication skill, it's really key for your success to progress in the firm where you are, in the company where you are, with your peers, with your manager, with the seniors, and with your clients. It's so important to deliver a good communication, the good presentation, and so important to know how to ask questions to your client. And also very important to know how to listen to them, right? Identify their concern. So this is the basic quality, but it's so important. And the third one, of course, the last one is good team player. Because you are working in financial service sector, we're working on team. It's not a solo. So the good team player, it's very important quality. So this is my advice. If you are prepared, so certainly you are today preparing to enter into your career path, either in law firm or in the financial service sector. So all those qualities can apply to every sectors. I think in summary, the passion. So when you do a work, you must like it, right? It's not like a burden. Oh no, I have to do this. No, well, I hope your mindset is curiosity. You like to do it, and you eager to learn, and the good attitude for work, and a good team player, and communicate well, communication skill. It's very important for your skill.
Well, thank you so much, Lan, for those valuable advice, and thank you for sharing those wisdom with the student here in this webinar. And with that, really, we are coming to the end of this webinar. So I'd like to thank you again for joining us this evening. I guess it's your morning. While still under quarantine. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank all of the audiences who have joined us today for this event. Our next speaker event will be planned on next Friday. So you can log on to our website to sign up for that one. And Lan, again, thank you so much. I hope to see you in person, maybe in Beijing or Hong Kong this coming few months. And hope you have a great time back in China.
Thank you very much, David. Looking forward to see you soon. Bye-bye, everyone. Good luck for everyone.
Thank you.